Let's move on to our fifth and final main topic today. Chris, what is our fifth and final main topic today?
This is the one that our glorious little thumbnail picture from Ray is about. So good. This is from Fred Y. Hey, John. I originally thought people were taking Martin Scorsese's comments about real cinema a little too seriously. But I wanted to know if you saw his most recent comments. He seems to be doubling down on it, saying we shouldn't allow Marvel films to, quote, invade cinemas. What are your thoughts on his comments? How do you feel about this follow-up?
You know, one of the most frustrating things in the world is
What?
defending somebody, and then that somebody does something that makes your defense of them look dumb.
Yeah.
That has happened to me several times. And it has happened again. Look, when Martin Scrosese, one of the greatest filmmakers in the history of the industry, and if you want to talk about people who know cinema, you don't need more than the digits on one hand to count the people who are better at it and who know it more than Martin Scrosese does. Let's just be clear about that. So when Martin Scrosese came out the other week and said, you know, I don't really consider, remember, I cut him a lot of slack because it's not like it was a prepared statement. He was asked a question, he answered it, and yeah, maybe the wording was a little bit off, but he basically, look, I don't really consider Marvel types of films cinema, as well as they're made, you know, made well. You know, when you look at the aspects of cinema, they're not really cinema to me, but whatever. And to me, I thought everybody gave Marty too hard of a time. Come on. I mean, look, just because we as comic book movie fans, we can be overly sensitive little whiny babies sometimes. And I'll include myself in that, all of us, comic book movie fans. It's like, you know, oh yeah, everything's great. Somebody said something about not loving comic book movies? Boo! Like we are oversensitive little babies sometimes. That's what we do. And I thought that maybe we were doing that a little bit when Martin Scorsese mentioned that. He said, look, they're well made, but I don't really consider them cinema and blah, blah. It's like, okay, whatever. No big deal. No big deal. And I said, well, I don't agree with what he said. And I think if Marty paid a little bit more attention, because I did take issue with the fact that he said he doesn't even watch them. I'm like, how can you give a qualifying statement about movies you don't even watch, Marty? But, so I didn't agree with that. I took a little bit of an issue with that. But overall, I think we were all making too much of a big deal about it. Well, no, we weren't. No, people weren't. Because recently on stage, Martin Scrosese was doing a Q&A, and he decided not to qualify his statements, not to say, I was hoping Marty Scorsese would come out and say something along the lines of, look, I just watch these films and I think they're well made, but I think they lack some of the artistic merit that traditional film really does have. And I would respect that. If that was his point of view, I would respect that. I was hoping he would say something like that, but he didn't. The master, Marty Scorsese, decided to double down and make his intentions clear. He not only does not like comic book movies, he doesn't even think they should be in theaters. This is what he said. These are his newest statements. He said, the value of a film that's like a theme park film, for example, the Marvel type pictures, where the theaters become amusement parks, that's a different experience. As I was saying earlier, it's not cinema, it's something else. Whether you go for that or not, it is something else, and we shouldn't be invaded by it. We shouldn't be invaded by it. And so that's a big issue. And we need the theater owners to step up for that, to allow theaters to show films that are narrative films. It's something else, and we shouldn't be invaded by it. Comic book movies, ladies and gentlemen, apparently are invading us. They're not just not the best, they're actually uninvited guests to Martin Scrosese. These movies are uninvited guests. We don't want them here, says Martin Scrosese. They're invaders. And so that's a big issue, and we need the theater owners to step up to allow theaters to show films that are narrative films. Now, I have gushed, and I will continue to gush, about the genius and magnificent that is the deity that walks among us known as Martin Scrosese. And whatever he says or thinks about comic book movies, none of that changes that he is one of the greatest who has ever done it. And is still today one of the greatest on the planet to do it today. Regardless of how misguided I think his comments on this issue was, none of that changes. So let me preface everything that I'm going to say by Martin Scrosese is way smarter than me. He's way smarter than you. He's way better at this. He knows more about movies than you or I ever will in our lifetime, and he deserves all the respect in the world. That's the foundation. That being said, Scorsese upping his attack and the verbiage he's using, and this wasn't just a random question he was asked on some carpet or some interview. This is him on a stage. These are clearly remarks and thoughts he had given some thought to. And he is now showing his hand that not only does he not like comic book movies, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that if you don't like comic book movies, even if you're Martin Scrosese. But referring to them using words like they're invading us. We shouldn't be invaded by it. We need theaters to step up and nudge out some of these other movies so we can make room for my kind of movie, is what he's saying. You know, last week I made a video talking about the Jennifer Aniston comments about how she longs for the day when we didn't have all these comic book movies and we could have, you know, who's in it?
Meg Ryan.
Meg Ryan. I almost said Meg Kelly. Meg Ryan movies. I long for the days of Meg Ryan movies and movies like Terms of Endearment. And my underlying thought on that was, that's cool, but a lot of these celebrities seem to have a mistaken concept here that, oh, if these comic book movies just disappeared, everybody would be flocking to the theaters to watch Terms of Endearment. And that is a fundamentally flawed point of view, thinking that this is cause and effect. Martin Scorsese, first of all, I got to take issue with this. Number one, Martin Scorsese saying things, and again, saying that this isn't cinema, it's something else. Whether you go for that or not, it's something else, and we shouldn't be invaded by it. Marty, you've already admitted you don't even watch these movies. How can you sit there and say, being the God amongst men that you are, how can you sit there and say, make qualifying statements about a movie genre that you have already self-admittedly said you've never fucking watched? This is below the greatness of Martin Scorsese. For him to make something, because that's just a plain stupid thing to say. That's like saying, you know, I've never watched an episode of Breaking Bad, but man, the acting in it's not very good, and the stories are lame. But Kim, you just said you didn't watch it. I know I never watched it, but the acting's bad and the stories are lame. That's one of the most ignorant things you can possibly say. And for a godlike man in the form of Martin Scorsese to come out and say, I don't watch these, they're not for me, but let me tell you about these movies that I don't watch. They're different. They're not real cinema. They're different. Now, look, I've said before, Rob, and I stand by it, a lot of comic book movies are spectacle. You know, they're not The Godfather. And so I saw a little bit of validity to a degree. I saw a little bit of validity in what Martin Scorsese was saying before about that, because, yeah, they are mostly spectacle, but we are starting to see this genre transcend itself and getting deeper and deeper. I mean, you look at a movie like the Kenneth Branagh directed Thor. Does Kenneth Branagh not make cinema? When you look at the themes of fathers and sons and all the things that ran throughout in the package of a spectacle of Thor, I think if Scorsese had seen that, he would see what we're talking about. Maybe he's okay with Joker because he's the one who brought it to the table. I don't know. But again, much like the Jennifer Aniston situation, where she seems to have this, and a lot of these people in Hollywood right now have this misconception that, oh, if the comic book movies just weren't there, everybody would be coming to see my movies. And you know what? I'm going to say this right now, and I'm going to hold to this. I think a part of this is a little bit of sour grapes that he's not getting The Irishman on picked up by a traditional distributor and getting a traditional theatrical distribution. And I think he's looking for a scapegoat, and he's blaming comic book movies. Here's a news flash, though. AMC theaters alone, just the one theater chain. This is not counting Regal. This is not counting Cinemark. This is not counting Landmark. This is not counting all the other movie theater chains out there. AMC theaters alone in 2018 played over 206 different films on their screens in North America in 2018. You know how many of those are comic book movies? Less than 5%. Less than 5%. Martin Scorsese, the God amongst men. How can you sit here and say, oh, theaters need to make room for these other movies. They had over 96% of the theater screens. What are you talking about? If theaters would only make room for these other movies, they're playing these other movies. They're there. I don't mind a conversation about, hey, let's talk about the artistic merit of comic book films, that comic book films need to continue to evolve and incorporate more truly artistic merit. I'm all for these conversations, but quit throwing up these fake nonsensical arguments. We're being invaded by comic book movies. You know how many Marvel movies are coming out this year? Or in 2020? I believe 2. 2! We're being invaded. Oh, theater owners need to make room for other movies. More than 96% of the screens are being taken up by other types of movies. And I just, it's upsetting when somebody who is so not good, somebody who is so great, like a Martin Scrosese, somebody who is so smart and knows this business, says something so stupid. And especially it's frustrating when I just spent a couple episodes defending him and then he comes out and doubles down on this, which makes me feel dumb. Not the first time that's happened. But I just think what Scorsese, again, when Jodie Foster makes an off-the-hand remark, nothing to get too upset about. When Ethan Hawke makes an off-the-hand remark, nothing to get too upset about. But come on, we've got Ben Kingsley, Sir Ben Kingsley, Academy Award-winning actor Ben Kingsley, performs in these movies. We have Robert Redford, one of the greatest icons. We have Sir Anthony Hopkins appearing in these types of movies. We have legends. We have Kenneth Branagh directing these movies. We have legends of the screen participating in these things in a developing and growing genre that isn't fully mature yet, but it's getting there. And then we got people like the greatest of the great in Martin Scrosese making just asinine, ridiculous comments like this that makes me mad, not because you're saying bad things about my comic book movies, but he's making himself look like he's out of touch. And he is the greatest of the great. And it's frustrating to me. Anyway, I'm sorry, I've ranted on that way too long. Rob, you read these comments. You saw what Marty had to say. What do you make of them?
Well, yesterday on my own show, Robservations, I went into this at length. And I just as an experiment, I looked back at the top 25 movies of this year so far, and the top 25 movies in 1980. All right? In the top 25 movies in 1980 included both Popeye and Flash Gordon, which were comic strip adaptations.
I love that Popeye movie.
Any Which Way You Can, which was a sequel to Any Which Way But Loose, Every Which Way But Loose. Smokey and the Bandit 2. The top 3 movies were 9 to 5, Stir Crazy, and oh, guess what? The Empire Strikes Back. 1980, 39 years ago, and 2019, actually, there's a few more comic book movies, but in terms of sequels, there's a bit more now. But in terms of populist movies, pretty much the same. 40 years apart, you could make an argument that the same kind of movies are in theaters now that were in theaters 39 years ago.
That's a good point.
What has changed is the amount of money movies cost and the amount of money that movies make at the box office, because there's now a global marketplace, and the real difference is, what do global audiences want to see? And global audiences want to see what they've always wanted to see, which is populist movies. But American movies are now getting released on a global scale, which they've never been released before. Now, then Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the great basketball player who's now a TV writer, wrote a great article in the Hollywood Reporter about Martin Scorsese's comments. And basically he made the point that there is populist films, populist art, and there is high art. Now, I think, John, you said it very correctly. Martin Scorsese's new movie, The Irishman, 3.5 hours, an epic that used new special effects technology with our greatest actors. No studio could make that movie for 150 or 160 or 175 million, whatever it ends up costing. No studio could have put that movie out and made money on it. The global environment that we live in is just not going to support that kind of a film. It's not going to make $1 billion. And that's what a studio needs a movie to make in order to release it in theaters.
If it's going to cost $170 million to make. Yeah.
Exactly. Netflix, which didn't exist 40 years ago in 1980, along with many other streaming services, are providing a new outlet, a new choice for viewers, something that has revolutionized both filmmaking in terms of being able to support films that would not get made. We live in a new environment. So what Martin Scorsese, like you pointed out, he's out of touch. I think his own streaming service that came and rescued a project that no one else would make has given us and viewers around the world, because Netflix is around the world, a new venue to see movies that wouldn't otherwise get made. And we're going to see it in the theaters. I believe AMC made a deal with Netflix to show The Irishman in movie theaters. So we just live in a new world. It's a new evolved world, as every world that we've ever lived in is constantly evolving and changing. And we have more opportunities now. These opportunities to make The Irishman didn't exist 10 years ago. So Marty should just chill out. You know, like you said, people love comic book movies. I wanted to see them my whole life. I never got them. But because of technology where it is now, we get them. And it's great. And I love them. And I bought them all. And I want to get that Best Buy $500 box of all of the Marvel Infinity Saga 4K discs. I don't think I could ever afford it, but I want it. And Marty's just flat out wrong. He's wrong, dude.
Yeah, and look, and here's the other thing. It's unnecessary. Because, look, if a celebrity comes out and says, a filmmaker, an actor, whatever, comes out and says, I don't like comic book movies, and that bothers you, that's on you. They're allowed to like or not like what they like. But when you're somebody in a position like Martin Scrosese who comes out, I don't really consider the cinema, and then you go on and continue and you double down on it, now you're using aggressive language like they're invading us, movie theaters need to stand up to these things. Now you are without any real function or purpose, for no reason whatsoever, you are antagonizing and alienating a fan base for no reason. Mm-hmm. There's just no reason for it. He made that comment about not really being cinema, and you know what? We've almost all forgotten about it until these new comments. It only took a couple of days, and we'd almost all forgotten about it. But then he doubles down on it like this, and you know, he's not taking into consideration. Rob, you made the history you just pointed out is great. There has always been populist film, and is Popeye cinema? Probably not.
But it's made by Robert Altman.
Yeah.
And it's always been there, except now it's popular. And basically what Martin Scorsese has just done is he's gotten on a pulpit and said, you unwashed masses, shame on you. And it's like, Marty, stop. Just stop. Make your amazing movies and let us just appreciate them, and then let us decide what we want to watch.
And John, in the ultimate irony of ironies, the number one movie in theaters around the world is a comic book movie that owes a huge debt to Martin Scorsese's films Taxi Driver and King of Comedy.
And then brought to the studio. He's the one who brought it to the studio with the director.
It's just unbelievable to me that, of course, I guess, in terms of drumming up, no publicity is bad publicity. And here we are talking about Martin Scrosese, and he's got The Irishman, which I think is going to win Best Picture at the Oscars this year. So what does that say about all of this?
All right. Anyway, Chris, you heard Scorsese's comments. Are we coming down too hard? Are we doing exactly what I accused all of us of doing last time he said something? We're all being too hard on it. Where are we at here? What do you think?
Well, last time you posed this question, I believe on air I said, get bent, Scorsese. And I don't think that you should yuck people's yum. If you like something, that's fine. If you don't like something, that's fine. I don't like horror movies. I don't think people who enjoy horror are uncultured swine. And it's cinema. I'm going to take the Robert Downey Jr. stance here. It's cinema. It plays in theaters. I don't know. And I'm also not going to listen to somebody who was in Shark Tale about what is and isn't good.
Well, let's be careful. He is still Martin Scorsese. But look, it's just, again, I would feel less wound up about this if he watched every movie.
Yeah.
If he watched all the comic book movies and came out and look, I go to see them because everybody loves them, so I take my grandkids but man, it's rough for me to get through. If he at least saw them.
Right.
Yeah.
I would give, but the dude is making these qualifying statements about movies he's admitted he doesn't. Anyway, guys, I've taken up too much time on this already. What do you guys think about this? Maybe you're thinking, you know what, Campea, we're overreacting to what he said. We're overreacting to what he said. Maybe you've got some good points for it. Are you thinking, no, Campea, we're underreacting? We should be more upset about it. I don't know. What do you guys think? And I decided to make that the topic of today's question of the day. And our question of the day, very simply put, was this. Martin Scrosese is now saying we shouldn't allow our theaters to be invaded by comic book movies. Does he have a valid point, or is he just refusing to acknowledge different style of films from his own? We discussed on the live show. Right now, I put this up just before we started the show. A little over 3,000 of you guys have already voted. 18% of you saying, you know what, listen, Scorsese's put the outrage aside for a second. He's got a point. Meanwhile, 82% of you are saying, no, he is fundamentally being unfair with these comments. He is just wrong. So that's what you guys are saying in there right now. I'm going to leave that poll up for the rest of the day. And by all means, guys, I want to hear from you. If you've got a thought on this, jump down to the comments section below and let us know your thoughts. All right. With all that down now.